Hello, my name is Elliot LeMay, this is Patrick Riley, and this is Elise Baker, and today we'll be presenting on the Mayan collapse.
Well, first we're going to have to start out with some context. The Mayans existed between 1800 BC to 8250. They peaked between 350 and 400. They're a group of adjacent independent city-states that corroborated to form multiple powerful city-state empires. But who is a Mayan? Maya is an ethnic term used to describe a group of people that existed before Columbus arrived in Mesoamerica or the introduction of Europe to the Americas. And over 6 million Mayans continue classic ancestral traditions, as seen in the picture here. So, although the Mayans disappeared suddenly, scholars debate the true cause of the collapse of Mayan civilization, the primary causes being drought, warfare, climate change, and agriculture. We decided to ask this question ourselves. Why did Mayan civilization collapse? Although scholars debate the ultimate cause of classical Mayan civilization, the structural demographic theory encapsulates the defining factors of the Mayan civilization's demise. And this is Phil on what the structural demographic theory is.
Thank you, Elise. Structural demographic theory really just follows four factors: the state stability/instability, population, and elites. Once a society reaches its peak, these very same factors will steadily and predictably run a society into the ground. As you can see here, our presentation will mainly focus on agriculture, warfare, and class structure. The STD originated from American sociologist Jack Goldstone and was more importantly developed by Peter Turchin, who, in 2013, actually predicted instability and violence in the United States in the year 2020. We can safely assume as historians that he was correct. Our group says that there was a clear peak in Mayan civilization between the years 350 to 400. While some city-states survived classic collapse, their cultures didn't really evolve, and so they follow the same timeline. Following the structural demographic theory, our group can confidently say that there was a steady and predictable fall. Here's Elise on the agricultural lens.
Thank you, Patrick. This is the agricultural lens, and it supports the structural demographic theory. Destructive farming techniques could not maintain their progress. Destructive farming techniques could not support the growing population. The Mayans grew corn, beans, squash, and cassava. Farmers expanding to high and lowland territories created a surplus of food, which led to a population increase in 360 AD. However, the Mayans could not maintain their progress. These techniques, such as slash and burn, terracing, and a lack in crop rotation, caused a downfall in their population. So, slash and burn is a technique in which the site is cut down and burned and new seeds are sown in. Cameron McNeil and colleagues conducted a sediment core study that proves that during the classical Mayan period, deforestation is owed to the Mayans and no other factor. Terracing is soil manipulated into flat and level slopes. This quote by Robert Santley, Thomas Killian, and Mark Lysep supports my theory, and although terracing made a large impact, it is not owed to the Mayan collapse. A group of slash and burn and terracing and lack in crop rotation owed to the Mayan collapse, not just terracing. And this is a graphic that ties everything together. As you can see here, stress on cultivation and water sources leads to an open burned landscape, which, along with deforestation, leads to soil and soil nutrient loss. And this, because of these techniques, the Mayans had deficiencies. Hypoplasia is a deficiency due to lack in nutrition shown prominently in the teeth. This is common within Mayan children and lower-class Mayan citizens. The teeth shown here is from a Mayan terminal classic remains. And this is a graphic that shows percentage of individuals with hypoplasia. In the dark gray, this shows that the most percent of hypoplasias, because the Mayan collapse, is during the terminal classic period, which proves that during the terminal classic period, the Mayans were starving. Following the structural demographic theory, agriculture is a factor that can incite rebellion and class structure and warfare, as shown with the and this is Phil on warfare.
Thanks, Elise. As we can see here, there is evidence of Mayan bone trauma that makes historians believe that spiked clubs were used in Mayan warfare post their peak. This is evidence of the instability of Mayan warfare, since these clubs would have been cheap weapons only given to drafted commoners. While there was actually a decrease in warfare near classical collapse, there was also an increase in the violence of warfare, as hard times tend to breed violence, and these spiked clubs were particularly brutal. This is all consistent with the structural demographic theory. Here we can see an example of a pre-war ritual, and these rituals would have actually brought the Mayan community together before their peak. and were actually a key part of society. Once interregional warfare became unsustainable, however, war no longer really benefited the community. In the year 378, close to the Mayan peak, lower-class citizens from the Mayan city-state of Tikal provoked Teotihuacan, a foreign power, to invade them. This foreign invasion would have strengthened rebellion among the lower classes and actually support the idea of an incohesive class structure in all Mayan society. There's an argument to be made that Tikal was Aztec since it was under Aztec control, but since Aztec control would have been purely as an economic outpost, this argument doesn't really work. A higher consumption of agricultural goods initially benefited the Mayan community by having a positive effect on population growth. Here to the right, we see the value of services and the number of goods, and to the left, and to the right, we see the estimated population of the Mayan communities. We can see a steady trend to the top and then a steady downfall afterwards. This was all until rapid population growth resulted in both a population surplus and inavailability of food, both contributing to a destabilized class structure and intense interregional warfare. Essentially, we're arguing that the same components of Mayan society that propelled it forward are the components that destroyed Mayan society after its peak. Here's Elliot LeMay on some limitations to our resolution.
Thank you, Patrick. So some limitations are that the classic Mayan collapse does follow the structural demographic theory to an extent. For example, we can see that there is a clear peak in Mayan society, and some aspects of civilization that once worked together to help advance their society actually started to hurt each other and hurt the society as a whole. It can also be argued that classic Maya did not actually collapse, but instead more dispersed into different areas of Central America. Also, climate change, while it may have been a contributing factor to their downfall, it does not exactly follow the SDT, which contradicts our main resolution. Now onto the climate change lens, which is our counter-argument. So there is no way that climate change could have both propelled and brought the Mayans down, because Mayans did not have the technology to control or predict climate change, so they wouldn't have been able to use it to their advantage to actually advance as a society. The main aspect of climate change that really affected them was drought. The Mayans experienced many consistent droughts, which is why they should have been used to them. If the Mayans were used to droughts and used to dealing with droughts, then drought should not have been a main factor in their decline. We can see that there have been many droughts from lake cores from the Yucatan Peninsula, which is around the area of Mayans, that are able to tell us that drought was a big factor in the world around that time. Now back to our resolution, release paper.
Thank you, Elliot. As shown with the agricultural, social, and warfare lens, a lack in food can cause political instability in interregional warfare, and this is consistent with the structural demographic theory. But why should we use the structural demographic theory more? Civilizations rise and fall, and understanding it can help modern historians with modern civilizations. This graph supports the structural demographic theory. As Phil has said before, within 50 years apart, there has been a prediction in political violence for 2020. It was to be predicted that political violence would rise in 2020, and we can correctly say that this is true. And that is all. Thank you.
Excellent, guys. Very good work. So let me ask you a couple of questions here, just to follow up on your research, and I'll start over on the left here with Phil. And so Phil, you guys had some changes, as you mentioned, throughout your group structure and how you started working together. So in the future, if you could change something about your group norms, how would you expect that to improve your team presentation of that?
Well, I know, especially for myself, I really worked on my own lens before contributing much to the resolution, and I feel as though as a whole, our group, we kind of went into our own individual lenses before contributing to the resolution. If our group could come together and focus on a strong lens that adds to the resolution, our resolution would only be made stronger. Let's say, for example, if we all came together and started focusing on an economic lens, and we could talk about how the value of goods and services rose up and steadily declined, that would contribute a lot to the structural demographic theory.
Very true. Good point. Yeah, if we had more time for it. And then Elliot, since I'm over here with you, what do you think, and you covered the limitations in yours, but which of those do you think was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion that you identified, and why do you think that is?
I believe that the strongest counter-argument to our resolution was the climate change lens, because it completely contradicts the SDT in saying that the Mayans experienced drought a lot, and they should have been prepared for it, and it doesn't make sense that it would have both helped them advance and eventually brought them down.
Yeah, good, true, good contradiction, so good to point that out. And then lastly, let me jump over to Elise. So now that you've finished your group's project, what do you consider to be, if there is anything, a gap in your team's research that if you addressed it would make you feel a little more confident about your conclusions?
Well, there has been a gap. I mean, when our slides were due, we had a group member drop out, so we just decided to scrap the lens entirely and be like, oh, maybe we should introduce an economic lens like Patrick was talking about. So I feel like if we really all worked on that last lens, it could really bring the structural demographic theory together, because like in the theory, it says that economics is a part of the reason why societies rise and fall. So I think that would be a good addition.
Exactly, and there's so many curveballs that come to you, especially in 2020 as we're
Yes.
going through, as you're graph through. So thank you guys, very good work.